Well, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Diana Burley. I am Vice Provost for Research and Innovation at American University in Washington, D.C. That's my day job. My real job that I have spent over the last 25 or so years has been working on developing the cybersecurity workforce. As a professor, as a researcher, running research institutes, working for the federal government, running scholarship programs, consulting with companies, really anything related to building the workforce is what I've been doing. And so when we had the opportunity to come and speak today, Sasha and I, who will introduce ourselves in just a minute, we're talking about some of the work that we've been doing and really talking about how we met and started this journey together. I came to AU about 4 years ago, just in the middle of the pandemic. And as I was getting acclimated, Sasha and I started to talk, and we realized that there was a nice synergy there because I had spent a lot of time researching the problem, talking with employers, working with employers, and working with students a little bit. But as I like to say, Sasha loves the kids. And so Sasha has spent that time after leaving the FBI, after leaving consulting and doing those kinds of jobs. She spent that time working with the students and trying to figure out how to help them get into the workforce. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we have learned about why this problem persists. Why is it that we are still talking about the workforce gap after years and years and years, and frankly lots of effort and lots of money in trying to figure out how to fulfill the workforce needs. So we're going to get started. Sasha, do you want to introduce yourself before we jump in?
Sure. Just thanks again for coming. We like to think of ourselves on this Thursday morning as the warm-up act for Alicia Keys. So she's sending us big thanks for getting everyone going this morning. But again, thanks for coming out on this last day of RSA. It is my first time at this conference. It's been awesome and inspiring and honestly a little bit overwhelming, and really an honor to be here and be amongst you. As Diana said, I came back to AU just about 5 years ago from my time in federal service and my time in consulting. And I've spent that time, as Diana mentioned, working with undergrads, graduate students, and I'm involved in a couple programs in DC too that bring students in from around the country who are interested in cyber. I also sit up and lead our graduate certificate in cyber policy and management. So I work every day with students trying to get jobs. And so I get a lot of firsthand qualitative data on that experience. So as Diana said, putting that together with her decades of experience kind of researching the problem holistically and working on initiatives, we're excited to try and kind of put those pieces together for you and offer some suggestions about maybe some very tactical ways forward.
So we're going to buzz past the disclaimer because if you've been here for more than a few days, you've seen that about 85 times at this point. So this is just an overview of what we're going to talk about. So as we said, we're going to talk about unbundle this persistent problem. Why are we still looking for these candidates, these ideal candidates? And so we were able to find this. I don't know if you can see the image of the unicorn behind there, but I will tell you, and Ron, our track manager, is here, and one of the questions he had is this really a unicorn? And so it's like, oh, they don't actually exist. And so it is actually a horse. But we want to really emphasize the fact that it's just really hard to figure out what exactly it is we're doing. And then, as Sasha said, we're going to go through and talk to you about some of the strategies that we think will help you figure this problem out. So, despite decades of work, we still seem to be spiraling around the same circle. And as I mentioned, I've spent the last 25 years working in government, working across industry, helping people try to figure out what it is they're doing. And most recently, last summer, when the White House, OECD, released their national workforce strategy, I was helping to review that strategy and then talked and presented at the rollout of the strategy. And it really gave me pause. Not because of the content that was in there, but because of the progress that we haven't made. Because we've really spent the last 30 years trying to figure out the same thing. And I said, you know, it can't be that we're constantly looking at the same issue or looking at the issue in the same way. So I started thinking back and trying to characterize what exactly is it that we have been doing and thinking about as we've been looking to solve this problem? And what I realized is that we haven't actually been solving for the same problem. It hasn't been that for 30 years we've been saying the same things. We've actually been looking for different issues. And so in the early 2000s, and this was a time when I was working at the National Science Foundation. I was running, if anybody is familiar with the CyberCorps program, it is a scholarship for service program, so I was running that program for the federal government. And at that time, as we spoke with employers, federal employers, state level government agencies, and even private sector employers, there were a lot of complaints about knowledge gaps. The complaint was, I'm going to a university, I'm trying to get students from that school, and I have no idea what they know because the programs, the few that there are and the few that there were at that time, even if they were labeled as cybersecurity programs, they all taught different content. And so you could go to American University and Carnegie Mellon University, and the label would be the same, but what the students learned was completely different. And so the focus was on working with colleges and universities to say there have to be some standards. We need to understand what this means. What are these knowledge gaps? How are we able to really get a sense of what's happening? When we moved into the 10s, we recognized that it wasn't just knowledge gaps that we were looking at, but it was skill gaps. That it wasn't just what do you know, it was what do you know and what are you able to do. And so at that time, I was working and I was a member of the ACM education board, and we developed, we initiated a task force in conjunction with or in collaboration with IEEE. And I led that task force, co-led that task force with my colleague Matt Bishop, who's at UC Davis. If any of you know secure coding, Matt wrote the book on secure coding. And our task was to figure out not just the educational standards for knowledge, but also how do we put that into practice? What are we actually wanting people to be able to do, hands-on keyboards? Fast forward another 10 years, and where we sit today is that we're finding that the focus now is on experience gaps. So it's not what do they know? It's not what are they able to do, it's what have they done. So we're going to go through each of these just for a few minutes, just to talk specifically about some of the things that I have found over the years. And as I do that, I think Sasha can put some context to it, because as I've been working these issues from a sort of a macro perspective, she's been on the ground and she has been actually working with the students and the employers and seeing what that mismatch looks like. So as I mentioned, when we were in the early years, when we were 30 years ago, it wasn't about what the students were saying they knew, it was what they actually knew, and the focus was on degree requirements. And so as you know, there has been a lot of talk, even lately in the national strategy, there's been a lot of talk about degree requirements. Are community college degrees okay? Do students need bachelor's degrees? Should we really be looking outside of that? Is a high school education okay as long as it's coupled with other things, right? But there's really a lot of discussion still around this idea of what degree requirements should our students have, but not just what the degree requirements are, but what is the content in those programs? What do we want our students to learn? And so there has been a lot of discussion and a pushing of more and more content into these academic programs to say, we want them to know all of these different components, regardless of what area of the workforce they're gonna go into, of the cyber workforce they're gonna go into. We're pushing a lot of content into these degree requirements. In DC, and I can tell you that one of the reasons that the degree requirements is still an issue, although fortunately it's loosening a bit, but one of the reasons that it's still an issue is because we have federal contractors. And the way that the OPM regulations are written, the Office of Personnel Management, the way that those regulations have been written is that in the contracts, contractors have to have workers on the contracts that have certain degree requirements. And so it wasn't about what the students knew, it wasn't about what they were taught, it was simply a contracting vehicle issue. So we've tried to address these issues by making sure that at least there's some consistency across the programs so that when you go to programs and you're able to connect, you're able to get at least some sense of what the students know, and it's not solely based on the label that exists. And that you're able to really discern, based on the content, what type of degree actually makes sense for the types of roles that you're trying to fulfill. When we get to the skill and the credentialing is when we start to talk about, and this came about when we did a study for the National Academies and we were looking at this discrepancies between the degree programs and the recognition that it wasn't just about what they knew, but what they could do. And then there were lots of conversations around, well, you know what, I don't even care. So there were two camps. There was one camp of employers that said, I want to see all of these credentials because the credentials mean to me that the potential employees know this particular tool or know this particular skill set and can do this. The other camp said, I don't really care what credential they have because I'm not looking for the specific details of that. What I'm looking for is some indication that they are committed to continuing to learn, and that they are committed to the professional development that we know will be required as they move forward in the profession. So the message went out to students, okay, you need to go and you need to get some kind of certification. And so you see a lot of the students, even the high school students, that are starting to say, all right, well, let me go to community college to a prep program as I'm in my high school program. Let me do a boot camp or something so that I can get these credentials, these certifications. And that's when you start to see candidates that have, this long list of certs, right? Because it's really just about wanting to build that up because that's what they think is going to get them the job. So it doesn't mean that they can do it, and we all know that some of the certs don't even require a lot of hands-on, right? It doesn't mean you can actually do it, but you start to see candidates that have this long list of certs regardless of whether they have a degree. Employers caught on, right? I see people nodding their heads like, yeah, they have these long lists of certs, but they can't actually do anything. And so they caught on and they said, I don't really care how many certs you have. I don't really care what degree you have. I want to know that you've done this job before. Because I don't believe the content. I frankly believe that the faculty know what they're talking about and that they could get you the knowledge that you needed. But even if they did, that doesn't mean you could do it. I don't necessarily believe that you can do what you say you can do from this list of certs. So I want to know that you've done it. Where have you worked? What kind of work have you done? Even at the entry level, we want to know what you've done. Tell us what you've done. Show us what you've done. And so now the focus is very much on experience requirements. Well, you can imagine that as we talk to students, and Sasha, you talk to the students, and we have gone from, education requirements to experience requirements. What are the students to do? And what do they say when you talk to them and they're looking for jobs and they're looking at position descriptions?
Absolutely. So, and before I sort of share that perspective, I'd ask all of you, we have a poll running. We're data people at the university on our LinkedIn. So I know you won't do it now because the talk is so riveting and your phones are down. But if you have a chance, as I would say to students, to go to our LinkedIns. We're running a poll for those of you who are employers. We're really curious what you prioritize on this list. It really helps us going forward to understand that. So what do I hear from students? I not only hear that this list is long, right? And whether they're prospective students and they're wondering, where should I prioritize? I have limited resources. Which of these things should I do? As Diana said, on education, what kind of degree? On credentials, which degree, right? Where's that roadmap? And we know there are some of those things out there, thanks to you and others. There are some of those roadmaps, but it's very difficult to have those be accessible for students. In addition to this list, if that wasn't enough, just from recent experience, both this semester with my undergrad students, and then I recently was an advisor for a program at the Washington Center. So those of you who may not be familiar, the Washington Center is an organization in DC that's been running career accelerator programs for folks who have resource needs, right? So they get a great diverse community, the folks we really are looking for and need in this field. And they recently started something called the Cyber Accelerator Program. So I got an opportunity to work with that cadre of 85 students recently, many of whom come from community colleges and others. And both in my class, where we bring in a lot of guest speakers and a lot of advisors, and in the Washington Center's Cyber Accelerator Program, which was over a weekend with many, many employers, the number one thing employers advised our students is not even on this list. Anyone guess? What do employers want that's not on this list? Don't make me call on people. I work in a
Just
classroom.
shout it out.
Shout it out.
History,
What's that?
work history.
Work
Well,
history
that's
would
on
go
the
in
list.
experience.
Yeah.
Anything else? So everyone.
Wait, I heard somebody say something.
Thank you. So soft skills, right? Every single employer, be they from government, the private sector, advisory firms, technical firms, the policy world, they all said, you need soft skills. You need to be able to communicate, you need to be able to translate, you need to be able to work across teams, right? All of these things. So most recently, the sort of thing that I think sort of captures this best is I have a student named Emily who was graduating this year from AU, amazing student, looking for a job. And she came up to me and she said, Professor O'Connell, here's the thing. I'm looking for a job. I'm going through all these position descriptions. I've been working on my soft skills, right, as well as everything else. And these are page-long position descriptions that articulate, as Diana said, education requirements, credentials, experience. And then there's one line on page 2 that says soft skills, right? And she was like, I don't understand. Every person we talked to this semester said that's the number one thing. But to Diana's point, we're not taking anything away from these position descriptions and rebalancing. We're just adding on, right? And this is where we get to kind of this unicorn situation, where we're looking for something, sort of a preset package unicorn, that frankly is, it just really isn't out there. I don't even know how to use this, but I'm gonna figure it out.
The big green
The
button.
big green button, that's thank you.
We're professors, don't worry.
Thank you, we've got this. So this is kind of what we're offering, or our perspective here too, right? Is that as employers, we need to take a minute to think about this, right? Can we, you know, the old adage, I guess, is we want it fast, cheap, and good, right? And that's sort of the world we're in with candidates. We're talking specifically about entry-level candidates, and that's where we've done the research. Diana has a long history, and I'm working with those kind of candidates. But I would offer too, having come out of the federal government at the senior executive level and working with senior executives transitioning into this space, it's often the same, right? So our first point we really want to leave you with is, like, maybe the call is coming from inside the house, right? We complain about this persistent workforce issue, but as employers, right, we are not taking anything away or taking responsibility for adding and building skills once we have candidates on board. We are adding to the list of requirements. So I can tell you, right, it is very frustrating for the students I work for across the board to hear in every context about this persistent gap and really have no foot in the door, right? Be really, really struggling to get even that first interview. So that's really the piece we want to think about how to address.
And you can, you know, I challenge you to think now, even about position descriptions that have gone public in your own organization. How many of you can think through and really articulate, oh, yes, we added all of these requirements, but we took all the rest away. What typically happens is that you say, in the best case scenario, what happens is that you say, you know what, we're gonna put required and then we're gonna put these preferred, right? And we're gonna put them in this other category. But even when you do that, you still really look at that other list, right? It's not like you don't look at that, you still look at that. And so this is why you end up saying, you know, there's no candidates out there. We can't find anybody. And the students get frustrated. I mean, I speak at these conferences all over the country for years, and people come up to me, candidates, who say, you keep saying that there's this need. Everybody keeps saying that there's a need. You told me to get a degree. You told me to get a cert. You told me, and I still can't get a job. Nobody will hire me. What is it? And it can't be because that particular person wasn't qualified, right? I mean, at a certain point, we have to start to look inward and say, not only have we been solving for different parts of the problem, but we have pushed it all together into one thing, and we've got to now take that step back together as the folks that prepare the students and as the folks that are recruiting the students. We have to take that step back together to unbundle it and figure out how we can go forward and stop searching for that mythical creature.
So we're going to go forward with a couple tactical suggestions, and also just to be clear, we're not abdicating all responsibility, as you said, on the education side. We know there's ongoing work to do in translation and in tailoring of our programs, but what we're going to offer here, and I think Diana, you'll go through the full framework and then we'll focus on the determined section, is some ways as employers we can think about addressing this persistent problem.
Yeah, so as you take that step back and you think about your position descriptions and you think about, you know, have we just been adding? What haven't we taken away? What could we potentially take away? What we've done is we've laid out a framework, and we use the framework term loosely because this is, you know, very, very high level. But we've given a few steps for you to take that step back and to systematically take a look at the position descriptions for the different roles that you are trying to fill. Because as you do that, when you start to say, all right, let me unbundle this, let me look at specific roles, let me look at the entry-level analysts or whatever it is that you're trying to find, just for that one role, identify that role. Take a look at the position descriptions in that role to begin to familiarize yourself with not just what you're looking for today, but perhaps what you have been looking for over a period of time. That's when you can start to determine the unicorn gap, is what we're calling it, related to the knowledge, the skills, and the experience. And Red, because that's the one that we're going to go through, like step through, and Sasha's going to step through that in just a second. But once you do that, you can then begin to evaluate exactly what is it that we need. Is it that our position descriptions are asking for things that we really don't need in our candidates, and that's why they don't have it? Or is it that the candidates really are deficient in particular areas? Because that's when you can then strategize and you can work with your academic and training partners to figure out how to fill those gaps. So this is what we're suggesting that you do in terms of, you know, sort of laying out the whole process. And we're here to help you through that. But to give you an example of the kinds of questions that you can ask as you're going through these different steps, we're going to go through the determine box so that you can begin to see, what do we do short-term, long-term, how do we work with internally and external. So Sasha, do you want to go through determine?
Sure, absolutely. So for knowledge gaps, just a couple, and again, if we had more time as a professor and facilitator, I would love to just sit around and brainstorm this. We're going to offer just a couple ideas for each of these for your consideration. But on the knowledge gap piece, we're thinking both about how do you more creatively, maybe expansively think about candidates and what they might have, and then, as Diana said, how can you also round out folks who maybe came in with some of those other criteria met but don't have this so much. So existing micro-learning platforms, we've talked about quite a bit. They exist out there. One of the things we've been working on is cataloging those. Again, there's so many resources, but cataloging those and mapping those to specific incidences and needs is work that can, I think, be done and have huge short-term gains. Co-creating content with academic partners and establishing those relationships. So this is something, again, that we are very passionate about. I lead external partnerships for American University and in the cyberspace out of Diana's office. And working with employers is something we do every day, both, as Diana said, to understand what our students are coming with in terms of their academic degrees and really understanding what they mean, and then supporting in terms of lifelong learning on the other side, all possible. And developing those custom micro-learning opportunities, either with or without credentials. And again, obviously in this day and age, with the online platforms being available through academic partners and through training, again, cataloging, inventorying, and organizing those is something that we've been working on to make more accessible to employers as well. Anything else on that before we go on?
You know, I guess the only thing that I would say about the academic partnerships is that we recognize, and not just us at AU or Sasha and I, but we, the academic community, do recognize that it can be challenging to work with us. We work very differently than you do, right? And so we recognize that, but what we're trying to do, and what I work with my colleagues around the country on, is developing new ways of engaging with you so that we can meet each other where we are and understand the processes that we go through and figure out ways of pulling together so that there is content, because sometimes what the academic partnerships piece gets relegated to is coming in and guest lecturing. Don't get me wrong.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. If
That's
anyone
great.
wants to guest lecture.
If anybody's in DC or you want to zoom into a class, we welcome that. That's great, that's perfect, but that's not all we need, right? I mean, we need to make sure that we are both addressing accreditation requirements, which are the things that we have to do, but also addressing your requirements, which is what you need for the students to have as they come into your workplaces.
So skills gap. So again, cooperative learning structures with academic partners, something that we've talked about. So at American, we do offer custom executive education. We offer, we call it something called a SAMI class, which we think is a really novel kind of modality that has been of interest to a lot of our alumni currently, and that is weekend classes, right? Intro classes on topics that are available either a Saturday or a Saturday-Sunday to give learners who need that flexibility, need to come on the weekend, right? And we bring, you know, senior executives from around the space to come give that hands-on training. So we've been, as Diana said, trying to get more creative in terms of modalities to be able to collaborate with employers on this, and we can do a hands-on training in that context as well. Again, the counseling, and this is on us to work with our students to, again, balance. If I had a dime for every question I get from my students about balancing experience and soft skills and knowledge with that hands-on experience and certifications, right? And so sort of coming to some consensus and being all on the same page about the need for that balance is something we see that's important. Anything else on that one? I'm gonna roll. So
I would just say that we do try to pull all the pieces together. So we've started doing more tabletop type exercises and scenarios. We at AU just launched a range so that we can pull it all together, because our goal is to be able to have the students with this integrated knowledge, skill, and some experience, you know, in working within context so that they come and they're more ready when they hit the ground.
So experience gap. So one of the things we're really proud of in our program at AU, and I encourage all employers to look for and to value, is that practicum experience. So to finish a master's degree in our program, all of our students have to go through a semester-long practicum course where they work hands-on with an employer, right? And in my case, doing cyber policy issues, but some are more technical in nature. And I am thrilled when I hear students come back and say they spent their job interview for whatever is next for them, talking about their practicum experience, right? This is really the best we can do to prepare our students in this way, and that you really know they're not only sort of getting the cert and sort of sitting at home on those self-guided trainings, which we love, which they're a role for, but they have an opportunity to work with faculty, under faculty supervision, for a real client, to deliver real content, and to get real feedback. And so I encourage students to put that and highlight that on their resumes, and I really encourage employers to look out for those opportunities. We're not alone in offering those, and it really is an important sort of signal that students have had that experience in the context, right, of getting that degree and getting that knowledge.
You know, one of the other ways that we are leveraging, especially the sort of the micro learning opportunities like Sammy's and other things, is in conjunction with you looking internally. Looking at your internal labor market. Sometimes the experience that people have, while it may not be in the cyber realm, they have experience in your firm, they have experience in your industry. They know how to work internally with the people, but what they need is a little bit of a boost in terms of skills. And so when you think about experience, Don't just think about experience in the specific role. Think about experience in that larger context, because it may be that you can pull somebody from somewhere else in your organization. You can partner with your professional development partners, whether they're in-house or whether they're your university partners, and you can develop the skill set that goes along with the experience. So it's really turning that notion of experience on its head, or maybe expanding it a little bit to think more broadly.
And I'll add one more thing here for employers. If you're not familiar with a competition called Cyber 912, this is pretty, folks in DC know about this, but I don't know how far kind of outside the Beltway the news of this goes. But Atlantic Council runs annually multiple iterations of a policy competition. So it's a cybersecurity public policy competition for students across the country. And I'm not just saying we won a couple of years ago, but you know, AU's had our moments in the sun. But
maybe we should check out the winner in 2022.
Maybe, I'm just saying. But it is an incredible opportunity that Atlantic Council presents for students. And the ideal in these teams is that we mix technical students with non-technical students. So we have law students, we have policy students, we have students from our School of Communication, and we have our computer science students as well, working as a team through a scenario where essentially you get a brief. You have to do a policy brief. If you move on to the next round, you do a simulation that you're at the White House, right? Briefing the National Security Council, and you get injects. I will tell you, the students who have participated in the Atlantic Council Cyber 912, again, have an experience that's very unique. Not just that they've gone through a simulation, but they've worked with an interdisciplinary team on a cyber issue. And I will say, and I say to my students all the time, you now have a group of phone of friends, right? Who will not only sort of help you now, but later, as you disperse and work for different employers, will be able to collaborate and connect to solve problems. Okay, so we know that I know it's student day here. I don't know if there are any students in the audience, but we did want to just offer a few suggestions for students as well. Any of you who are in academia, I know there are a couple in the room. Some resources we're working on for the student side as well, because again, we get them excited about cybersecurity, and then about 6 months later, I get them in my office asking for help because of the situation we're in. So we just wanted to offer a couple things, and maybe Diana, I can talk about start here, and then you can talk about some of these other things as well. So along with our partners at CrowdStrike, so Drew Bagley over there, and then Megan Brown at Wiley Ryan, we have started a podcast. We call it a podcast, but it's really a set of audio files intended for educational purposes. And we call it Start Here, Cybersecurity for Policymakers, because it is the breakdown, again, intended for use in the classroom, kind of the 101 of things like, what is incident reporting, right? I've heard a lot of talk about that here. What is ransomware, and what are these policy interventions? We're right now in the middle of a series on who's who in US cyber policy. I've met with a number of folks here this week who said, can you explain how DC works to me, Sasha? I was like, actually, I'd love to. I teach a class in who's who in US cyber policy. So these are the kinds of resources, again, thinking non-traditionally, thinking a little bit creatively about how we're trying to offer these resources both to our students or maybe to existing employees you have to get a little bit, some of those other pieces in place that you're looking for.
Yeah, so we would be remiss if we didn't talk about AI. That's the theme of the whole conference. Everybody's talking about AI. And so, you know, not that we have any answers for you, but what we want to do is just to lay the foundation of your thinking around what happens in 6 months, in 5 years, in 10 years, as you begin to strategize. And what we hope is maybe adjust your strategy for developing your workforce or for pulling in your workforce as the workforce needs change because of automation, because of advanced and emerging technologies, which means that your workforce needs are also going to change. So we want to make sure that as you are thinking about these roles and as you're thinking about the way that you are engaging with your training and academic partners, the way that you're engaging with your HR teams, that you are also putting into consideration what are the building blocks of skills, of knowledge that our employees will need, even if some portions of their positions change because of automation or emerging tech, right? What are those evergreen skills that people are going to need regardless? When we get there and when we start thinking about that, what immediately people say back to me, and we're almost done, we want to hear from you, and so we've been talking a lot, but what often happens is people start talking about critical thinking and analytical skills, and all of those other soft skills that we showed you in the beginning aren't really even showing up in the position descriptions, even though that's what people are talking about. So we just want to put a little bug in your ear about thinking about the future of work and what's going to happen as we continue to progress with our emerging technologies.
So as Diana said, we want to leave about 10 minutes or so here for questions. We'd love to hear more from you, but we did want to offer a little bit of a framework, kind of a thinking about action steps coming out of this. So in terms of identify and prioritize, again, as Diana mentioned, as the place to start, right, to prioritize those critical roles with persistent workforce gaps. So again, I grew up in the government, right, and it's just always more, right? The answer is we need more. And so the question is, you know, really critically to prioritize. Right? Take some things off the list and throw that energy in that work around those top priorities. Do you want to do 3 months? I feel like 3 months is your spot.
And it doesn't have to be exactly 3 months, but you know, I mean, again, the idea is that this is when you start to really get into the meat of it. Once you've identified where it is you're going to be searching, you're getting into the meat to really think through what is the unicorn gap that we are really facing, because it's going to be different for every role, which means that the solution is going to be different. Now, you'll start to see patterns as you begin to evaluate across roles, but once you begin this unbundling process, it will go faster and faster because you'll be able to spot the discrepancies in those gaps much faster, and then you will already have solutions or solution partners that will help you to fill those gaps or close those gaps. So in 3 months, that's what we're thinking, is that you can begin that process to then get to that 6-month or 12-month, you know, cycle, end of the cycle, and then get to a place where you can reconsider, reimagine maybe your position descriptions and the way that you are engaging and working to fulfill roles.
Perfect. And we hope, just to this last point on academic partnerships, that while we know, kind of, again, having worked in government and then academia, sometimes partnerships can be challenging due to different incentive structures and timeframes, that we've given you some thoughts to think creatively about ways to engage with your university partners around these issues. Again, either understanding where their students are at, digging in a little bit to understand more about what's going on behind the scenes, or filling those gaps once candidates come on board with you. So with that, we would love to take questions and hear from you about your experience as well. Sure. I think we're being recorded, so a mic is helpful, yeah.
So many questions. So at breakfast this morning, I was talking to another manager, and we were talking about generational differences and some of those difficulties. Do you think that plays into some of this hiring reluctance?
On both sides, yes. So, you know, and Sasha will speak to it from the student side, but I can tell you from the other side, the challenge, and I would put this under the umbrella of the soft skills piece, is understanding the culture of your organization, understanding how that aligns or doesn't with the culture of the employees, and how the culture of the managers aligns or doesn't with the culture of the new employee, right? So it becomes a sociological experiment because there really are those kinds of issues that have to be addressed, and that really does mean that it's not just about the soft skills of the new entrants, it's also about the soft skills of the managers, and understanding that, you know, and we say that the new generation is different, and we say, oh my gosh, there's 4 generations of people in organizations now, but there's always multiple generations, and we always see the world a little bit differently.
And if I can add, I definitely have experienced the challenges, right, of managing folks of a different generation than me. I also have a 19-year-old daughter, so like, it's really alive and well in my house as well. I would say the biggest tip for me, or the biggest asset I now have, because I teach, but I do a number of other jobs as well, is that I have, if you will, sort of mentors who are in that generation and younger than me, right? I was just in a talk where someone talked about having mentors sort of ahead of you, and maybe mentors who are more junior, right, and of a different generation. The resources my students, and honestly my daughter on a good day, is to me to help understand, right? To be curious and to help understand how, what some of these communication gaps are and how to get through them. And to be able to get that guidance, just as a general tip, I will say, people come to me all the time and I'm like, yeah, I work with this age group all the time, right? This is actually what they mean. Here's a strategy for moving through that. So not to plug guest lecturing, but again, being on a college campus and getting to interact with folks in this age group in a constructive way and be able to ask questions to understand, I think it's a huge and underutilized resource for all of us.
Thank you. One more question. You mentioned micro-learning resources for industry. How would we access that?
So a couple questions. So a couple answers rather. I can only speak from an AU perspective, but I know other universities have all kinds of really cool programs. So for us, our graduate certificate is now available for external partners. So again, our certificate's pretty unique in that it's a non-technical graduate certificate in cyber policy and management. So we're working through how to make that available for folks who are out in industry. Similarly, our SAMI classes, we can connect both to take things off the shelf, and all that information is available at School of Public Affairs, American University, for non-AU students. We also customize programming, so we can do full courses, 15 weeks, we can do mini classes as well. And again, not to just promote AU, I know many of the universities have that. I know, as Diana said, like it can be really, again, in government, trying to partner with academia can really be frustrating. I think just like anything else, using that network to find that one person who can get you kind of inside and get you connected. For example, at AU, Patrick Malone runs our Key Executive Leadership Program, and he's kind of our partner person who can make the mechanics work, right? If we have content and a need to kind of make that work. So as Diana said, it's just thinking creatively, and unfortunately, like everywhere, it's about finding those people, right, who can make the mechanics of the university work for you. But almost every university has SAMI classes, executive ed, certificates, and all of those pieces as well.
And the ability to customize. I think that that's an underutilized mechanism, but we really can. We collectively, the Academy, can work with partners, with industry partners, to develop programs that work for you. That maybe on campus, sometimes people really want to come onto the campus. Sometimes you want us to deliver it on site. Sometimes you want to, work with us so that we can collectively work, because we all have the same end goal. Right? And it's to get people into the workforce. We just have different roles to play in that process.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
Hi.
Hi.
So I went to another talk regarding women in cyber specifically, and there was a saying that someone said, which was, women have been over-mentored but under-sponsored. So curious to know, what are you guys doing in terms of sponsorship for these students to say that, hey, they have been doing great things to your partners and the employers?
Yeah. Can I talk about this?
Yeah.
For the next 2 hours?
Maybe not that long.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, I think mentoring is important, but the idea of true sponsorship, right, for a lot of people. So I don't come from a cyber background at all. I'm non-technical. My background is, my PhD is in public administration. I worked in government, as Diana mentioned, at the FBI, doing strategy and policy. I teamed up with Dr. Jim Burrell, who's in the room here, who was at the Bureau with me and has a technical background. He was my phone a friend, and had a lawyer on one side and Dr. Burrell on the other. And so I think I'm in a unique position to work with students, women and others, who don't see themselves in cyber, right? And say, hey, cyber is for you, right? If I can do this, you can do this, which is step one. And then the sponsorship piece is where, again, just the partnerships with the employers to really connect and bring people together, not just, again, to get the job, but one of the things we see, and I certainly experienced in my time in government, is needing that support when you're in the job, right? So seeing them all the way through, spending the time. Diana laughs, I know we both do a lot of it. It's one of the most satisfying things I've been able to do in my career overall, is work with young women and all kinds of folks who don't see themselves in cyber, do that hands-on sponsorship. And the beautiful thing is, as all of you know as employers, I tell them, like, the employers are just as happy as I am. They're looking for you, right? So you're looking for them, they're looking for you, but right, it requires that hands-on connectivity. But over time, again, with established relationships with academic partners, we start to get that flywheel going a little bit, right? And be able, that sponsorship work gets a little bit easier because we have those existing relationships and employers start to know about our students. Our students get in and then reach back to our former students. So those pipelines help, but I couldn't agree more. I don't know if you have other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that reach back. So what we've done is, in particular, we have a new institute that we stood up about a year or a little over a year ago, and one of the key components of that is this networking piece. And the idea is that certainly I can sponsor somebody, right? I can speak for you in a room that I'm in, but I'm only one person. So what we try to do is we try to bring this network of people together who are either alumni who are working in the space or longtime partners and friends who have been working in the space, and we provide opportunities for us to engage and for our students to work on projects with us, to get in the rooms, to present to these other senior people, so that when the senior people are in the room, they can say, not just, oh yeah, here's a student, but here's somebody that I've seen their work, or I've seen the people who they have worked for. I have confidence in them and I think they can do it, right? And so we try to create many opportunities for that, so that our students are able to be spoken for in the rooms while we are also developing them, so that when they get in the rooms, they perform up to what we expect them to.
And I'll just add too, on the employer side, as Diana mentioned earlier, I think employers think about coming to university campuses for career fairs, right? And kind of thinking that they're gonna find their students. And what we have found is that, that has its role, and we love our folks at Career Services, and I'm happy to have those career fairs. But those employers who are in our classroom with us, again, guest lecturing, teaching, we have a broad array of adjuncts who come from industry, government and private sector. And that kind of creative engagement where they're really on campus, getting to know our students, and then those folks sponsor our students going forward, right, in their organization, because they've had them in class all semester. I tell them it's a tryout. You're looking for people, come teach a class, right? You'll see those students go through, get to know them, and that's the ideal. We don't have to serve as that intermediary, but you have those employers in the classroom with us, getting to know our students and their cohort, and then they get to sort of sponsor those guys moving forward. So it's another really productive way to keep that flywheel going, for sure.
So as we just have a couple minutes left, so we're going to close out. I just want to remind you that we do have our LinkedIn polls up.
Let us know.
We have our LinkedIn polls up that just to get your sense of, if somebody says, what's your one-word answer? If somebody asks you to prioritize, is it education? Is it experience? Is it skills? Is it soft skills? Just, what's that first thing that you say? And I will say that we both have it on our LinkedIn sites. You want to go to mine first because Sasha has more responses than I do.
We're having a friendly competition. Mine.
But seriously, please connect with us on LinkedIn. We have our email address up there. It will get to both of us, and most importantly, it will get to Yasmin, who will make sure that it gets to both of us. But we're happy to continue the conversation. If you have time and if there's space at 9:40 after the little break, we're doing a Birds of a Feather downstairs to talk a little bit more in depth about educational materials and how to find them and develop them. And but we're happy to continue the conversation as desired. So thank you for getting up so early and coming and listening to us.